What goes through your mind at a time like that?
I don't know. It's like, what happened?
Right. Mm-hmm. You write about removing a glove before taking the knife from Charlie.
You know, I had no conscious memory of doing that, but obviously I must have because they found a glove there.
And blacking out. Have you ever blacked out before?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
No. Of course, if something like this would take place in anybody's life, if it were to happen, I would imagine it's something that you would probably automatically have trouble wrapping your mind around it. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, the interviewer, bitter taste in the mouth. I talk about bitter taste a lot, and you're just going to see it with the little indents here. There is something really distasteful for her around this, quite obviously. And then she does a hard swallow as well. So there's potentially some stress around this, quite obviously. Her eyes go down. Is that because of his dominance, or is she showing social disdain? Let's move on a little bit and work out which one. He counters with a plea, it was horrible. So he's trying to have an alibi. Look, this was a horrible thing for me as well. Feel pity for me. And then we see a micro display of, I would say, disdain from him. The pity didn't work. I think she shows him disdain and horror, then disdain by looking away. He pleads for pity. She doesn't pity him. He displays disdain for her. That's why I think we don't like him in this situation, because unconsciously we'll be picking up his disdain for her disdain. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, he starts off with, I don't know, and he moves his head in what you expect, very short strokes when a person's uncertain, because they're not going to go, no, that's certainty. I don't know what's happening. His head is down and to the right. That's where he's living now. His head is actually starting to get heavy and pulling his body over. And that happens when you get to a very emotional state. And he left eye accesses, again, back to baseline. It looks a little different because his head is down, but he does this. Back up left eye access and go back and look. Every time he does that, it's a visual question, and he's answering. He has a fleeting emotion in his face in a way you don't typically see in adults and sophisticated people, which OJ clearly is. You see it in children before they understand controlling emotion. There'll be a mix of emotions flush across their face and fleet, and it's hard to even catch them. If you took this and slowed it down, you would see a lot of confusion and anger and all of those things. He shows a lot of different emotions there, and then he is now moved to a point where he can't get out of that emotional piece. And he says, wrapping his mind around it. And then when he's asked a question about the blood and all of that, he does the brave face. That's the brave face smile when somebody's dealing with a very complex thing. You've seen it all the time when somebody's dealing with a complex thing in their life, and you ask them and they go, everything's okay. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think he accidentally begins to use distancing language here. And this is important because I think he forgets the hypothetical part. And he's using the distancing language for his own comfort and not to appear to be innocent. So this is a rare case when we're going to see something like that, when he's trying to keep it hypothetical and using distancing language. And there's a lot of language here. He uses, I'll just say this one thing. He uses body narration, which is where he illustrates a story that he's trying to do something, and he shows it with his hands, which is his baseline for truth in every other video, to illustrate the difficulty of wrapping his mind around exactly what had just happened and what's actually going on. So we're seeing the hallmarks of his truthful behavior while he's describing this whole thing and how horrible it was. And the only other thing here that really stuck out was his blink rate skyrockets to about the mid-80s during this. Scott, what do you got?
I think the most important thing here is where she says, have you ever blacked out before? And he says, what? Not to my knowledge. How many times have you heard somebody say, not to my knowledge, and they weren't being honest with you? OJ is famous for having this temper that just pops off in a rage and just going off. If you watch those documentaries about him, and there'll be somebody in there each time that says, that he had problems with anger. He had an anger problem that stemmed from when he was younger and some other things that happened, from being a thug as a kid or whatever. So I think he did black out, and that's because he said, I don't recall. But that's when all that happened. Hypothetically, is if he did black out, that's happened before. And he's going through that again, and that kind of scares him. I think it bothers him. We're seeing more true emotion here, and he's reliving this as he's going through it. He would have said it would have been horrible, but he says it was horrible. So I think he's not even, I don't think he's trying anymore. He's just going right through it and telling us what happened.
And what goes through your mind at a time like that?
I don't know. It's like, what happened?
Right. Mm-hmm. You write about removing a glove before taking the knife from Charlie.
I had no conscious memory of doing that, but obviously I must have, because they found the glove there.
And blacking out. Have you ever blacked out before?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
No. Of course, if something like this would take place in anybody's life, if it were to happen, I would imagine it's something that you would probably automatically have trouble wrapping your mind around it. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
If you like this video, get the full body language breakdown and analysis on our main channel by clicking this video right here.